long history of kings and queens, nobles and warlike clans. A land too whose sons and daughters have spread far and wide across the world in search of freedom and adventure. A land, furthermore, that calls its sons and daughters back with a voice that speaks of tradition and an ancient culture. Let's discover Scotland. Scotland's position in the northwest corner of Europe made it the last resort of the Picts and the Celts, the original tribes of Britain, as wave after wave of Angles and Saxons came northward from Europe. The last frontier between the ancient tribes and the hordes from the south was here, in the border country between Scotland and England. The borders were sought out centuries later by modern-day invaders of a different kind. A difference between the laws of England and of Scotland meant that it was possible to be married here in the old blacksmith shop at Gretna Green without parental consent at a much younger age than in England. The laws have changed now, but a light-hearted ceremony commemorates the old days.
I thee wed.
I thee wed.
I wish.
I wish.
It was time.
It was time.
To go to bed. Under the laws of Scotland, you're no husband and wifey. Kiss the bride. Make you smile in Scotland and up your kilt with a wire brush.
But not the really old days. They were filled with strife and the roar of battle. Nearby, Caerlaverock Castle is just one of a chain of broken strongholds that suffered repeated sieges for nearly 300 years, until it finally fell in 1640. Now its ruins bear silent testimony to the love of a people for their land. And what a land! Around every corner, over every hill, lies another scenic marvel. The grey mare's tail falls 200 feet into an area known as Moffat Water. Surrounding it are the beauties of Solway, the southern shore where sturdy villages sit among rolling, fertile farmland. Monks came here from England to build their abbeys, such as Sweetheart Abbey, founded in 1273 by Queen Devorgilla as a lasting memorial to her beloved husband. New Abbey Village, which grew up around the abbey, boasts a fully functional watermill. There has been a mill here on the stream called Sheep Burn since medieval times, though this one is barely 200 years old. The population is sparse over these rich acres and the climate mild, moderated by the broad expanse of the Solway Firth. The area is much loved today by the sailing fraternity, as well as by the farmers who benefit from the generosity of the soil. Threave Castle is another of the ruins that bear testimony to the ferocity of that love. It was built in the 14th century in the reign of King David II of Scotland. The town of Kirkcudbright is home to many artists, enchanted by the quiet beauty of what has been called the Venice of Scotland. To the west, Port Patrick never quite became the busy port its builders intended. Eastward of Kirkcudbright, the land border with England was easy to cross, and for centuries it was crossed by raiding parties from both directions. The castles bear witness to that. Hermitage Castle can tell a romantic tale, for it was here in 1566 that Mary, Queen of Scots, rode 25 miles across wild moorland to visit her husband-to-be, the Earl of Bothwell, as he lay wounded after a battle. These were the moors that gave Mary the chill that weakened her for the rest of her days. Mary rode out on that raw October morning from Jedburgh, with its beautiful 12th century abbey, which had received its fatal blow from the English only 20 years before. Here, among the purple heather of Teviotdale, are the hills that Sir Walter Scott called the Delectable Mountains, a paradise for walkers. The shape of the landscape comes from its underlying sandstone dotted with drumlins, mounds of boulder clay laid down under the ice sheets 10,000 years ago. The soils of the valley are good, but with a small rise in altitude they give way to moorland, so often the dark and looming background to the gentle lowland scene. The sedate little town of Peebles was burned to the ground by the English in 1545, rebuilt and then burned down again, accidentally, in 1607. Fire played a part in the history of Dryborough Abbey too. It was repeatedly burned by English raiders. What is left today is an elegant testimony to the craftsmanship of its 12th century builders. Within its walls lies buried Sir Walter Scott. These rolling limestone hills clothed in heather were where Sir Walter Scott chose to build his beautiful home, Abbotsford. Finished in 1824, it is the very model of a gentleman's residence of its period. The builders were local men. One of them a skilled sculptor as well as a master builder. John Smith's carvings are one of the beauties of Abbotsford. The library contains a bust of Sir Walter, along with his own reading desk and his collection of about 9,000 books and historic pieces of furniture. In the study hangs the famous painting of the only occasion when young Sir Walter met the famous poet Robert Burns. Sir Walter's writing desk contains 2 secret drawers. In one were found 57 letters exchanged by Sir Walter and his wife before and after their marriage. Flours Castle nearby never saw any border fighting. It was built as a country house. The 10th Duke of Roxburgh lives here today. Flours Castle stands just outside the town of Kelso, which itself lies at the junction of the rivers Tweed and Teviot. Today, Kelso's a tidy little town, proud of its floral traditions, but it has known more violent days. Kelso Abbey was another victim of the English in 1545. It was destroyed and its inhabitants slaughtered by the Earl of Hertford, acting for the English crown. Kelso is one of the many border towns that holds an annual common riding. The ceremony dates from the days when it was the responsibility of the townspeople to ride out to protect their boundaries from encroachment by neighbouring towns. The history of the border towns is often tied up with those long past days of violence and military might. Near Lauder in Lauderdale stands Thirlstane Castle, the home of the Maitland family. They live there still, in a home built for them in 1678. The house was remodelled in 1840, but the magnificent ceilings date from the first building. Thirlstane Castle is the site of the Scottish national horse trials, reflecting the long tradition of horsemanship and hunting in the borders. The packs of hounds on show here are working dogs, taking a day off from their more serious employment. The jumpers competing in the cross-country are looking for higher honours in Europe and around the world. Beyond Lauderdale on the coast lies the little fishing port of Eyemouth, once the haunt of smugglers, who could easily give the Coast Guard the slip among the narrow alleys of the town. Today it is once more celebrated just for fishing and for the beauty of its setting. North of Eyemouth is St. Abb's Head. Its cliffs are home to colonies of seabirds and clusters of rare and unusual plants. Further up the coast, John Muir Country Park commemorates the most famous son of the little town of Dunbar, the naturalist who was so instrumental in convincing Americans to create national parks. Tantallon Castle, towering above the water, was always said to be the strongest castle in Scotland. Beyond its soaring ramparts lies the Bass Rock. It is the home of the largest colony of gannets in Europe. The closest harbour to the Bass Rock is North Berwick, once a busy fishing port, but today a sleepy little seaside town. In 1591, with the full approval of King James VI of Scotland, the town burned 94 witches and 6 wizards for dancing with the devil. Back inland, the little town of Gifford is typical of the quiet backwaters in this part of Lothian. Despite their turbulent youth, such settlements have reached an old age of tranquility and calm. Some settlements have reached a very advanced old age. There has been a watermill at Preston for more than 500 years, and the present buildings are at least 300 years old. Dirleton Castle was built around 1225 to defend the approaches to Edinburgh if an invasion were launched from the Firth of Forth, just a little to the north. The castle served well enough for a few centuries, but in 1650 it was destroyed. Today, the most abiding relics of its long history are the magnificent gardens. Scotland's gardens are famous all over the world, none more so than the Royal Botanic Garden in Edinburgh. It has the largest collection of rhododendrons in Scotland, and its rock garden is famous. From Colton Hill, just outside the city, the well-known skyline comes into view. The castle, Princes Street, and the Scott Monument are its symbols, but there is more to Edinburgh than these. It is without doubt one of the world's most beautiful capital cities. Charlotte Square, the centre of its Georgian elegance, was designed by the well-known 18th century architect Robert Adam. Other parts of the city lack the grace of the Georgians, but add an excitement of their own. The streets of the old town were named according to their uses. The grass market here was the centre of the trade in hay. The old town grew up under the shadow of the castle. Next to Greyfriars Churchyard stands the Victorian monument to Greyfriars Bobby. He faithfully guarded the grave of his policeman master for 14 years. The heart of Edinburgh is the castle, a favourite residence of the Scottish kings since the 11th century. Its ramparts offer commanding views all around the city, including Princes Street, famous for its shopping. The oldest part of the castle is St. Margaret's Chapel, built by the saint's son, King David I, in the early 12th century. Mons Meg, the magnificent siege gun, has been here since 1457. At 1 o'clock every day, the castle gives the city a time check with the 1 o'clock gun. In the Crown Room are the Scottish Crown jewels, a collection of great magnificence. The Scottish crown, sword and sceptre were walled up here after the Act of Union between England and Scotland in 1707. They stayed until the chamber was opened again and the jewels put on display in 1818. The wealth of Scotland and its kings may be judged from this small show of their finest jewellery. Today, the wealth of Edinburgh stems partly at least from its attractiveness to visitors. The Royal Mile proudly displays the history and traditions of Scotland to all comers. There's even a whisky centre, in case anyone needs to find out more about the water of life. Under a magnificent golden kite lies Gladstone's Land, a 6-storey building completed in 1620. It has been refurbished as a typical well-to-do home of the period. Its furnishings reflect the wealth and culture of the merchants of the time and the comfort in which they lived. Edinburgh's most famous church, the High Kirk of St Giles, and the magnificent buildings of Parliament Square were all built of stone from the Craigleith Quarry, the source of Edinburgh's classical beauty. Nearby, beneath the Tron Church, archaeologists have discovered some of the city's earliest streets, probably dating from the 16th century. Under the city chambers lies Mary King's Close, another ancient street with a tale to tell. Jimmy Thompson is a local historian who has studied old Edinburgh and the way of life of the poorer people who lived and worked in these narrow alleys. Their fate was somewhat harsher than that of their royal neighbours up on the hill.
This is Mary King's Close, part of the old town of Edinburgh, which dates from the early 16th century. These were probably the first skyscrapers in the world, or anything from 9 to 12 stories high, and so narrow at the top, it was possible for the residents to step out and shake hands with the people who lived opposite each other. They were last occupied in 1645 when most of the residents died of the plague. Also remaining are the old bakehouses. We have a ghost here, that of a young girl dressed in white, wearing boots and accompanied by a dog who has been seen wandering the various closes and rooms in the vicinity. We too have a character associated with this area, known to the world as Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, but in Edinburgh he's better known as Deacon Brodie. He was a respectable businessman and councillor by day and a thief by night. 200 years ago, he was convicted for theft and hanged. He prompted Robert Louis Stevenson to write his famous book, still widely read, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Deacon Brodie's Tavern is on the corner of another part of the ancient Royal Mile, the Lawn Market. Among the medieval buildings are craftsmen and tradesmen who have been serving Scotland and the world for many years. Some new trades have come into being in recent years. For example, the souvenir peddler or the genealogist, a favourite in Scotland. It's tempting to buy a kilt while in Edinburgh, but to wear one properly you have to have the swagger. In the 16th century, the Tolbooth was built as a courthouse and prison. Today it's a museum. Nearby, White Horse Close is a group of 17th century houses that have been restored to their former beauty. They stand near the gates of the palace of Holyrood House, originally built as a guest house for the abbey. England's Earl of Hertford wrecked the palace in 1544, but Charles II rebuilt it, beginning in 1671. What we see today is a mixture, added to by successive monarchs up to and including King George V. The present Queen visits here every summer. 111 Scottish monarchs gaze from the walls of the Great Gallery, including Queen Mary, whose own chambers were preserved by the special request of Sir Walter Scott. The painted frieze is As She Knew It, and there's her monogram on the ceiling. The room resounds with the horror of the night of March the 9th, 1566, when Lord Darnley and his men stormed in and murdered the Queen's Italian secretary, David Rizzio. Every August, Edinburgh is the site of the International Festival, which was started as one way to heal the divisions between nations that existed after World War II. Attendees at the first festival in 1947 witnessed the reunion of the great conductor Bruno Walter with his beloved Vienna Philharmonic Orchestra. Today, the festival is an annual event in which avant-garde productions on the fringe surround artistic achievement of the highest order. For 3 weeks, the city is ablaze with art and audacity, with everything from the one-man shows of the fringe to great operatic and orchestral performances that attract audiences from all over the world. Pianist Arthur Schnabel described the first festival as a demonstration of an unbroken faith in uniting human values and virtues. As it approaches its half-century, the festival's values still shine out, and the world comes to its door. In addition to the arts festival itself, the 3-week period includes a film festival, a television festival, a jazz festival, and a book fair. But the center of it all is the music and drama of the original concept in 1947. The festival goes on through the night, every night. It's an unforgettable experience, a growing atmosphere of international goodwill and excitement. Along with the fireworks, festival audiences see one of the most moving and rousing ceremonies in Europe, the military tattoo, held at night on the esplanade of the castle. pipes and drums of the Highland regiments provide a spectacle that can be seen nowhere else in the world. Every stone in the background sings of pride and tradition. Displays by gymnastic teams from the army have become a regular part of the tattoo. But it's the music and the spectacle that draw huge crowds every time the tattoo is performed as the climax of the festival. On the quiet shore, further along the Firth of Forth, stands Linlithgow Palace, a favourite residence to all the Stuart monarchs and birthplace of Mary Queen of Scots. North of Linlithgow in Edinburgh, the Forth Rail Bridge crossing was opened in 1890. The bridge took 7 years to build. Almost 1.5 miles long, it is a monument to the genius of Victorian engineering. We're now entering the old Kingdom of Fife, between the estuaries of the Forth and the Tay. Its isolation has protected both the man-made and natural beauties of the peninsula. The little fishing village of Crail has some imaginative decorations on the houses. Overlooking St Andrews Bay are the ruins of St Andrews Castle, destroyed by England's King Henry VIII when he declared war on Scotland in 1543. In 1654, part of the castle walls were used to repair the harbour. The cathedral, too, is in ruins, having been stripped during the Reformation in the 16th century. When it was built in the 12th century, it was the largest church in Scotland. St Andrews University is the oldest in Scotland, founded in 1411, and the golf course, laid out in 1754, is the premier course in all the world. The world's first professional golfers played here on one of the world's first 18-hole courses. Today it's the scene of the Open Golf Championship, which draws the attention of the whole world. A few miles inland from the eastern part of Fife, or the East Neuk as the local people call it, lies the village of Falkland. It grew up round the Palace of Falkland, for generations the favoured place of Scotland's royal family. The palace has been restored by the National Trust for Scotland. Back on the coast, the city of Dundee has a turbulent history, having been occupied and burned by warring troops, alternately English and Scottish, no less than 4 times between 1547 and 1745. Today, it is a prosperous city, thanks to a trade boom during the 19th century. Modern public buildings blend with Victorian pomp to create a city filled with civic pride. It is the home of the famous Dundee marmalade, together with other Scottish delicacies such as petticoat tails, a form of shortbread. Dundee cakes are exported all over the world as the perfect accompaniment to tea, or whisky if that's the way one's tastes go. As for fish, Dundee can offer as fine as anywhere in the world. Its fish shops are places of pilgrimage to those really in the know. On the waterfront sits another of Dundee's famous products, the ship Discovery, in which Captain Scott sailed on his fateful last voyage to the Antarctic. After all her adventures, she has come home to the city where she was built. Dundee has been a centre of shipbuilding and sailmaking since the early part of the 18th century. Dunfermline is at the western end of the Firth of Forth. While the ruined abbey was being excavated in 1818 to make way for a new church, the builders found the body of King Robert the Bruce, who won independence from England in 1314. Not far from the abbey stands the cottage in which Dunfermline's most famous modern son was born. Andrew Carnegie, the son of a poor handloom weaver, went on to become one of the greatest industrialists of the steel and railway age. Today, the cottage looks as it did when Carnegie knew it as a boy, and it houses a museum that tells the remarkable story of his life, from the horrors of the voyage to America to his later prominence as a financier and philanthropist. Carnegie's fame spread all over the world, but he never forgot his native town. In 1902, he set up the Carnegie Dunfermline Trust for the benefit of local people. For a man who claimed not to believe in charity, he gave away a lot of money, more than $350 million. Further up the Firth of Forth, on the north shore, is the town of Corus, a unique survivor from the 17th and 18th centuries. The town is almost completely unchanged since the days when it was built. Sir George Bruce's palace dates from the late 16th century. Its ceilings, painted 100 years later, are typical of mansion house decoration of the time. A little way across the hills of Tayside, there is a small factory where Caithness glass is made. Using techniques that have not changed since they were pioneered in Venice centuries ago, Perthshire craftsmen produce paperweights of the most exquisite beauty. The little thistles from this workshop find their way all over the world as lasting mementos of the skill of their makers. Nearby, in the city of Perth, on the north shore of the River Tay, Branklin Garden, owned by the National Trust for Scotland, has been described as the finest 2 acres of private garden in the land. Its spring flowers are famous, and horticulturalists come from far and wide to admire. In the village of Cumbrae stands the headquarters of the Scottish Tartan Society. To an outsider, the complexity of tartans is dazzling, but each has its meaning, and each belongs to an individual clan. There are kilts here worn by John Brown, Queen Victoria's trusty servant, and a piece of the clan tartan that Neil Armstrong took with him to the moon. The tools and implements of this ancient art are preserved in a shed or bothy in the garden. To go with the tartan, bagpipes are not essential, though they are exported all over the world, wherever Scots gather. The sporran, or men's purse, is vital, however. No Scotsman is properly dressed without one, hanging in front of his kilt. Choosing a full Scottish rig is first a matter of finding which clan you belong to. Each clan contains a number of families entitled to wear its tartan. Then, when the tartan is selected, it's yours, whether you like it or not. Fine woolen cloth for the cool Scottish weather. The rest of the outfit comes next. The jacket, the belt, and of course the sporran are only part of the kit. Before he's fully dressed, this young man will need the right sort of socks or hose and the little knife or ski-and-do to go in the right sock. And, of course, the swagger to carry off the most distinctive national dress in the world. Harry Lindley is a kilt maker and an expert on tartans.
Scotland is the home of tartan and goes back many centuries. The development is very interesting for everyone who shows interest in the Scottish clan system for well over 1,000 tartans. Many of them, of course, are recorded and registered and have heraldry tied up with them in the Lord Lion's office. The young men of Scotland in particular, for the 21st birthdays, will have a Highland outfit made, given them by their parents, or having their father's kilt outfit amended for him if his father's decided to give it up.
There's no doubt that in full Highland dress, a Scotsman can claim to be among the best dressed men in the world. Traditionally, the happy couple gives money to the children at the wedding before they leave. Glengullandi Deer Park in Breadalbyn, Highland cattle mingle with red deer in a collection of many of Scotland's native animals. On the far bank of Loch Tay is the pretty village of Fortingall. Nearby, Blair Castle is the seat of the Duke of Atholl, chief of Clan Murray. The ballroom offers an exhibition of local history, and in the entrance hall a large collection of arms surrounds a portrait of the present Duke. The stuffed stag was a tame one that lived in the park in the mid-19th century. His name was Tilt. The rest of the interior of Blair Castle reflects the growth of the house from 1269, when it was started, to more recent additions, some barely 100 years old. Above the River Tay, the hills of Tayside are often referred to as the gateway to the highlands. Not far from here is Burnham Wood, where moving trees gave Macbeth such a fright and brought about his downfall. The Linn of Tummel, Linn is the Gaelic for pool, is a lovely, quiet, wooded valley owned by the National Trust for Scotland. In contrast, the 18th century summerhouse built by the 3rd Duke of Atholl at the Hermitage looks over a turbulent waterfall where the River Bran thunders through its gorge. Queen Victoria often visited here for the thrill of a close look at the falls. Her favourite view, however, was this one, along Loch Tummel itself. It's still called the Queen's View. The 18th century produced some fine country architecture. The House of Dun was designed by William Adam, Robert's father, in the 1730s. Its chief glory is the plasterwork, which is famous all over the world. It was created by Joseph Enza and finished in 1743. His fee for the work was £216. A careful study of Enza's design has revealed mysterious emblems among the warlike images and the musical instruments. The instruments themselves are clear enough, but the meaning of the rest is yet to be discovered. Some people say that these walls bear a cryptic Jacobite message put in by Enza, perhaps for his own satisfaction. The countryside that supported and still supports these grand and glorious houses is some of the most fertile land north of the Firth of Tay. It supported the Lindsay family of Edsall Castle for 400 years, until they died out in 1744. Their memorial is the beautiful formal garden at the castle. North from this rich country lie the Grampian Mountains, crossed by a series of old tracks once used by whisky smugglers. Dunnottar Castle looms from its crag, surrounded on 3 sides by the ocean. There has been a fort here for 1,000 years or more. The coast below the castle is dotted with fishing harbours, such as Stonehaven. Along this coast, fishing is an important industry, and the fish market at Aberdeen is a centre of the region's trade. Every day, the boats land hundreds of tons of fish to be auctioned in the early morning so that they will be fresh in the shops that same day. Surprisingly, Aberdeen became an important fishing port only in the 1870s, when the harbour was modified so that the herring boats could unload at the quay. The fishery is not what it once was, but Aberdeen is still a busy port. After the end of the 18th century, the city grew as a shipbuilding and trading centre. But it has had 2 universities and has been a centre of the arts and learning in Scotland since 1593. Its cathedral stands sternly over the city, perhaps suggesting why Aberdeen is sometimes known as the Granite City, from the stone from which it is built. But granite can be graceful, as in the lovely Bridge of Dee. And the flowered streets and modern housing reflect Aberdeen's new wealth as the offshore oil capital of Europe. The oil is out of sight over the horizon. In the Duthie Park Winter Gardens, the centrepiece is a hill of roses. Amid all the beauty of the Scottish summer, a palm and cactus house, supplied by early travellers for whom Aberdeen was home, a home to which they brought living souvenirs from their world wanderings. A few miles away, among its own lovely gardens, stands Crathy's Castle. It was completed in 1619. The castle was begun in 1533 and added to over the years by successive generations of the Burnet family. The High Hall contains an Italian marble fireplace of the 16th century in a room that was remodelled in 1870. The Horn of Lays was presented to a Burnet ancestor, Alexander Bernard, by King Robert the Bruce in 1323. The painted ceilings of the Room of the Nine Nobles are typical of the house of a wealthy 16th century baron, and they survive in their original form. The castle is haunted by the ghost of a green lady. This is her room. About 1860, the skeleton of a small child was found under the hearthstone, but nobody really knows the green lady's story. If walls had mouths as well as ears, these ancient castles could tell a tale or two of kings and queens and their comings and goings in this royal landscape. Ballater is a royal town and proud of it. When Prince Albert and Queen Victoria bought nearby Balmoral Castle, the railway line was stopped at Ballater to preserve the royal seclusion. The town benefited from the regular visits of the royal family, visits that continue to this day. The church at Crathy, that the royal family attends, is the second to be built on the site. The first in the parish was built in the 9th century. Queen Victoria called Balmoral this dear paradise. In 1853, she and her husband built this castle beside the site of an earlier one dating from the 15th century. The grounds and gardens are open to the public during May, June and July, together with an exhibition of pictures and works of art in the castle ballroom. The beauty of Deeside was what brought the Queen here in the first place. The scenery still draws country lovers, walkers and sightseers from all over the world. The purple Grampian Mountains rise above the valley of Deeside. Here at Braemar was where the Jacobites made an unsuccessful bid for the crown of Britain in 1715. They were the supporters of James Stuart, or Jacobus in Latin, and they believed that the crown still belonged to the Stuarts rather than to the German family that ruled in London. Today's ceremony symbolises the stability of the royal connection. Braemar is now the site of the annual Royal Braemar Highland Gathering, attended by Her Majesty the Queen of both Scotland and England. Since 1832, the crowds have gathered here to watch competitions in piping, dancing and the traditional Scottish heavy events, some of which are seen nowhere else in the world. At the centre of it all is the royal family, from the oldest to the newest recruits to their ranks. The flag of St Andrew of Scotland waves proudly over a gathering that itself is filled with Scottish pride. They come from all over the world, wherever Scots have made their homes, to share their heritage of tartans, clans, pipes and drums.
Yes, your applause as they come down your part of the arena. The masked pipe band, 10 and all.
From the far-flung corners of the world, and even from other older colonies in the west, the Scots gather at Braemar for their games. Putting the shot has become an Olympic sport, but tug-of-war, here between two military teams, has remained a more local pastime, though no less fiercely contested. Then there's tossing the caber, a uniquely Scottish event. After turning over completely, the caber is supposed to fall away from the thrower. Sometimes it doesn't. In the hands of a really strong man, it can seem to fly. And here there are some really strong men. Hammer throwers, shot putters, burly giants from the Highlands come here to demonstrate their prowess. But there's another side too. The grace and delicacy of dancing and piping, long a respected art form among this most artistic group of people. The climax is the tossing of the Braemar caber, the biggest in the world. North along the shores of the Moray Firth lies Gardenstown, a little fishing village founded in 1720. Like nearby Pennon, Gardenstown is a tribute to the determination of local people to settle even here in a harsh and often inhospitable landscape. Inhabitants practice the old skills of an agricultural people, such as sheepdog trials. To the rest of Britain, it's a popular televised sport, but these dogs are the shepherd's essential partners. The town of Huntly lies in the heart of the Grampian region. Its castle has commanded an important strategic position since the 12th century. It was repeatedly destroyed and then rebuilt as the fortunes of its owners rose and fell. When the second Marquess of Huntly lost his head in 1650, the castle fell, never to rise again. Fyvie Castle had 5 owners in 500 years. In the grounds is a statue of Sir Geoffrey Hudson, who was just 45 inches tall. A favourite pastime in this region, shared by lords and commoners, is salmon fishing. Crossing the Cairngorms brings us into the Highland region itself, where small settlements sit next to lochs, nestled among some of the most dramatic scenery in the world. The Highland Wildlife Park preserves many of the animals of these lovely hills. Here in the Spey Valley, the Cairngorm Mountains and the sweeping skyline bring a feeling of exhilaration to the traveller. Dark and gloomy glens preside over benign river valleys as the Spey makes its leisurely way to the sea. Between the brooding hills lies rich and fertile farmland, frequented by wildfowl in winter and by sheep and cattle all the year round. Speyside has produced the finest whisky since about the 14th century. Whisky is a version of the old Gaelic word meaning water of life. All along Speyside stand small distilleries. Some of them, such as Dallas Dhu, no longer produce. It was closed in 1983 and is today a perfectly preserved time capsule of the distiller's craft. Other distilleries put on a show for visitors, while they produce the whisky as they always have. The models here at Knockando Distillery demonstrate how methods have changed over the centuries, as handwork gave way to mechanization. Whisper this when in Scotland, but the art of distilling is believed to have been brought here in the 14th century from Ireland, by monks who had practiced it for a century or so before. The Whisky Trail is a string of distilleries that await the discerning devotee of the water of life. Each distillery is proud to demonstrate its art, and each is confident that its own product is the best, whether from the quality of the barley or the softness of the water in the initial brew. The conical stills, like a row of witches' hats, provide the magic that turns the first wash into spirit. The first product of distillation is as clear as gin, but there's more magic to come. In old oaken casks that are used over and over again, the spirit matures and finally acquires that clear golden colour that entitles it to the proudest name of all beverages, Highland malt whisky. At the Cardew distillery, Ewan Catanach has plans for the next century.
This cask here depicts one of the special reserves that we laid down in 1982. And these were filled when Prince William was born and will lie undisturbed to mature and mellow there for 18 years. So that means in the year 2000 we will be bottling a special reserve. But irrespective of whether they're special reserves like that, they're all filled into refilled oak barrels. And this is the product that is produced from that type of cask. This very delicate colour, natural colour. And that's one of the beauties of the single malt whisky that's produced in Speyside.
Speyside is the site of Cawdor Castle, immortalised by Shakespeare in Macbeth. Fort George was built by the British in 1748 as a protection against future Jacobite uprisings. It is still a working barracks, as well as offering a unique insight into military life in the Highlands 250 years ago. As it turned out, the fort was never used for the purpose for which it was built. Local historian Ian Meeke explains why.
Culloden. Now that's a word that stirs the heart of every Highlander. That's where the last battle was fought on British soil. Now it was not a battle between Scotland and England, it was a battle between the government and the Jacobite rebels under Bonnie Prince Charlie. There were Scots and English on both sides. Culloden is a great interest to so many people, especially to people from North America. There are in North America about 19 million people with Scots ancestry, and many of the ancestors of the North Americans must have been involved in the Battle of Culloden.
The battle lasted just 40 minutes. Bonnie Prince Charlie's army lost about 1,200 men, and the British just 310. Under the Duke of Cumberland, the government troops were victorious, and many Highlanders have never forgiven them.
Nowadays, the battlefield has been laid out with notices showing where the various units stood, just the same as the battlefields of the American Civil War. So people can stand and say, oh, the Campbells fought here, the MacDonalds fought here, and you can see where the various units stood facing each other on that bloody day in April 1746. One of the young officers in the government army was later to become world famous, General Wolfe, who stormed the Heights of Abraham. He was a young lieutenant during the Battle of Culloden.
Inverness, not far away, holds the proud title of the capital of the Highlands. Today it is a prosperous town, and the injustices of history seem far away. But the Highland tartan is everywhere, and nobody here has forgotten the day in 1746 in the parish churchyard when the Duke of Cumberland brought some of the prisoners here from Culloden and shot them. From the modern town of Inverness, our route takes us toward one of the country's oldest mysteries. A little to the southwest lie the deep, dark waters of Loch Ness. The loch is 24 miles long, 700 feet deep, and 5 miles across at its widest. It holds the largest volume of fresh water of any lake in the British Isles. But none of these impressive statistics is the reason for its great fame. It's the monster. Ian Meeke knows all about the monster.
Standing here on the shores of Loch Ness, a loch which is world famous because of the phenomenon which has been seen in it so often. The first sighting of this strange creature was recorded in 565 AD by one of the monks of St. Columba. They were en route from the west coast of Scotland to Inverness to convert the heathen Picts, and in his journal the monk recorded having seen a strange beast in Loch Ness. In the 1930s, the road along Loch Ness side was rebuilt, and in the course of building, the contractors had to blast thousands of tons of rock from the rock face directly into the loch. And shortly after this, the phenomenon appeared, and one of the local newspapers christened it the Loch Ness Monster.
Since then, the monster has come and gone from the headlines practically every year as the summer silly season and the time for increasing scientific research comes and goes. It's not that Loch Ness is any longer a remote and unvisited place. The Caledonian Canal runs through it, connecting Inverness with Fort William. Boats, both commercial and recreational, pass every day. Thousands of people scan the face of the loch through the summer, all of them hoping for, or dreading, a sighting of Nessie, as the monster is now affectionately called. It's even got a scientific name. No animal can be protected unless it has. Sir Peter Scott, the great naturalist, gave the beast the ringing name Nessiteras rhombopteryx, the diamond-winged giant of Ness. At the official exhibition centre, the evidence for Nessie's existence is marshalled for all to see, including a model based on the famous photographs that have been taken through the years. Some people still take the search for Nessie very seriously.
The Loch Ness project in the early 80s spent quite a lot of time doing sonar patrols, looking for targets that were deeper and stronger than the fish that we knew about. And we got about 40 in the early 80s. But we needed to know whether they were truly alive or whether they were in some way tethered debris. And in 1987, we came out with the Operation Deep Scan Fleet to draw a sonar curtain all the way along the loch. In that operation, we were trying to see whether the targets moved. And each time we got a contact, we marked it, we came back afterwards. If the target wasn't there, then clearly it had moved. There were 3 of those targets. Nowadays, we are setting up a fixed research station sponsored by the Loch Ness Centre at Drumnadrochit, and we will be conducting a general biological program with particular concentration on the open water and perhaps those enigmatic contacts again.
Or in other words, watch this space. Pushing north across the Moray Firth brings us into the county of Ross and Cromarty, a rolling, spacious area of dark hills under a wide sky, an area much loved by Andrew Carnegie when he returned to his native Scotland. The town of Cromarty dates from the 6th century, when St. Moluach founded a church here as part of the mission to convert the Highlands to Christianity. Hugh Miller is the local hero, a simple stonemason who became a noted geologist and theologian in the 19th century. The cottage where he was born is today a museum. Black Isle itself is far from black. It gets its name from St. Dutha, meaning black in Gaelic, who was another missionary. In fact, it is a fertile and temperate place, well known for its potatoes and spring flowers. North again, around Glen Loth, the scenery grows more bleak and the rocks more forbidding. Where the little rivers chew their way through the granite, gradually eroding the ancient rocks, they bring to the surface tiny flecks of a certain much sought-after mineral. Gold has been panned from these highland streams for many years, though never in truly commercial amounts. Moving toward the northern tip of Scotland, the landscape and its wildlife become wilder with every mile. Where the coast extends into the ocean, fantastic sea stacks speak of centuries of winter gales that have whittled them to their present bizarre shapes. The ruins of Castle Gernigo have stood since 1699, when the Sinclair family finally left after 200 years. The stacks of Duncansby guard the Scottish mainland near the most northeasterly point at the entrance to the stormy Pentland Firth. But more famous than the stacks is the northernmost village, John o' Groats. It takes its name from Jan de Groot, a Dutchman who settled here in the 16th century. Today it's the place to come to just because you can go no farther. Ah, but you can go farther, crossing the Pentland Firth to the island groups of Orkney and Shetland. Although fishermen and farmers have settled here for many centuries, it still feels as if the Orkneys are the domain of the ocean. The Norwegian Sea pounds their coasts with undiminished ferocity after millions of years, but still the islands stand, and still their cliffs are home for millions of seabirds in some of the largest colonies in Europe. Razorbills, guillemots, fulmars and kittiwakes nested here and fed from these waters long before humans appeared on Earth. Curlews own these windy moors. But a hardy race of people live here too, the descendants of settlers from Norway, later joined by mainland Scots. The laws of land tenure and fishing here are the laws of the old Norsemen. And before they arrived, there were others here. Orkney has more Neolithic remains in better condition than anywhere else in the British Isles. On mainland, the largest island, lies Maes Howe, an enormous stone-edged chambered cairn, 24 feet high and more than 300 feet in circumference. The stones are aligned precisely with the heavens. The sun shines into the main passageway only during the winter solstice. Carvings on some of the stones are runic inscriptions made by Norsemen about 1150. Intriguingly, one of them records that the treasures of the tomb were removed and hidden somewhere to the northwest, but they have never been found. These inscriptions form the largest collection of runic characters in any one place, anywhere in the world. Skara Brae, also on mainland, is a 4,000-year-old Neolithic village. It was completely buried under the sand for nearly 2,000 years. But in 1850, a violent storm carried the sand away, and this remarkable settlement was revealed. There are 10 houses and a workshop, with most of their furnishings intact. There is so much left undisturbed in the village that it's tempting to surmise that it was buried as suddenly as it was revealed, with the inhabitants having to hurriedly escape as storms brought in dunes that covered their home. There are stone bed frames, hearths and seats, and even shellfish tanks for storing the harvest of the sea. The existence of these people would have been ruled by forces that even we understand very little about. Monuments such as the Ring of Brodgar speak eloquently of the hopes and fears of our ancestors from the misty past. Ancestors of more recent time originated the midwinter festival of Up Heliar. It derives from a Viking feast that celebrated the return of the light after a long winter of darkness. Today, the inhabitants enter into the spirit of the feast, climaxed by the burning of a Viking longship. Shetland is 1,000 miles from London and only 200 miles from Norway. It's hardly surprising that the attitudes and outlook of the people who live here are more Scandinavian than British. Though the oil terminal at Sullom Voe handles more than 1 million barrels of oil a day from the North Sea, the pace of life in the islands is still dictated by the sea and by fishing. In spite of its peaceful appearance, Shetland can be a stormy place. The highest wind speed in Britain was recorded here. Just before it was blown away, the dial on the instrument read 177 miles per hour. The islands of Shetland, large and small, are crowded with the remains of settlements, both religious and secular, from all periods of Scottish and Scandinavian history. There is another product of Shetland that is famous all over the world, the Shetland pony. Though they were bred as draft animals, seldom more than 40 inches high at the shoulder, the ponies are kept as pets or riding animals for children in many parts of the world. The wild flowers of Shetland are also well known. Here, where the air is pure and farming too retains the cleanliness of older techniques, the hay meadows bloom each spring with a mass of colour and delicacy. The longevity of human settlement here is attested to by Jarlshof, a place that has been inhabited for 3,000 years, from the late Bronze Age until the end of the 17th century. The large, well-preserved building is known as the Laird's House. It was built by William Bruce of Fife in 1605. But the greatest interest is in the late Bronze Age buildings, and in the brochs and wheelhouses that date back to as long as 2,000 years ago. Moosebroch is the best preserved of this type of fortified house. The fortifications of the Noop of Nos, though natural, are no less impregnable. This is Western Europe's largest seabird colony. Sadly, today the colony is threatened by the decline of the sand eel population, which has fed millions of birds since time immemorial. Some people blame the grey seals for destroying the eels, but human endeavours are the more likely reason. Midway between Orkney and Shetland lies Fair Isle, which is even more Norse than its larger neighbour, Shetland. An old Viking saga tells how Ronvald won the island from Dagvin in the 12th century during a feud between the two earls that continued for several years. In his diary of 1870, Robert Louis Stevenson described the coast of Fair Isle as the wildest and most unpitying that he had seen. On a calm day in summer, it's hard to believe his account. Among the flowering sea pinks on the cliff tops, puffins make their burrows and rest on the rocks between fishing trips to feed their young. Fulmars nest on the grassy cliffs, and all is peace and tranquility in the gentle sunshine. Rabbits compete with the puffins to use the burrows in the soft turf. Because of its position on the migration route, Fair Isle is one of the most important bird observatories in the world. It has been used as a resting place during migration by more than 300 species. Swinging west across the ocean brings us to the Western Isles, another magical place that recurs in the dreams of Scots overseas. From the ferry, the sight of Stornoway on the Isle of Lewis must have brought a lump to the throat of many a returning traveller. At one time, this was a busy fishing port, but the fishery declined and the harbour is much quieter now. The island is the home of small farmers known as crofters, a few remaining fishermen and weavers, living among coastal scenery as fine and as rugged as any in the world. The warm waters of the Gulf Stream lap the coast, providing a mild, if sometimes rather damp climate. In the fertile fields of the coastal areas, dairy cattle flourish, in meadows dotted with flowers. The black streams, or burns, are coloured by the peat through which their waters trickle, water that makes what many consider the finest whisky in the world. The peat provides fuel, too, dug from trenches in the hillside in the same way as it has been done for hundreds of years. After it has dried in the fields for a few weeks, the peat is taken home and stacked for use in the winter. Haymaking, too, is done on Lewis in the traditional way. The landscape is dotted with conical haystacks that are typical of the Atlantic coast of the whole of the British Isles. The Black House at Arnold was occupied until about 20 years ago. Today it is restored to demonstrate what life was like in this community when people and animals lived under the same roof. Carloway-broch is second only to Moosebroch as an example of a fortified tower dating to about 300 BC. For about the last 200 years, the great trade that has grown up among the Western Isles is the weaving of woolen cloth, generally known as Harris tweed even when it is woven on Lewis. Where there is wool, there must be sheep, and where there are sheep, there will be dogs. The border collies, with the intelligence and obedience that make sheep handling possible all over Scotland. Shearing by hand in the old way is kinder to the sheep, as well as an art form that is satisfying in itself. When the fleece is gathered, washed and dyed, it will be woven on the old foot-operated looms that, curiously, qualify Harris tweed to be called hand-woven. Away from the agricultural coast, Lewis is generously sprinkled with little lochs among rolling moorland. To the west lie high mountains, and among them the amazing stone circle of Callanish. The stones are about 2,000 years old, and they stand in a geometrical pattern surrounding a burial chamber. Aside from that, nothing is known about their origin. On the Isle of Harris itself, where hand-woven tweed first became famous, the geography is quite different. The island is filled with rocky outcroppings. Its heavily indented eastern coastline is exposed to sweeping tides. Nevertheless, its people have loved it well. Mary MacLeod, a 17th century Gaelic bard, asked to be buried face down so that she would always be in contact with the earth of her beloved Harris. She lies in St. Clement's churchyard at Rodel. Shorn of their wool, the sheep look rather like the landscape of the island where they live, shorn of its soil by glaciation and the gales of the millennium. Spinning and weaving have been a tradition in the Hebrides for centuries, but it was only in the 1830s, when the Earl of Dunmore bought the island, that they came to world attention. The Earl's wife, the Countess, sent some lengths of the cloth to London for friends to admire, and the rest is history. Today, though, instead of weaving to clothe her family and neighbours, the artist knows that her cloth is a prestige product with a market all over the world, thanks to the well-known orb mark that identifies it as the best tweed one can get. From Harris, the ferry goes to Loch Maddie on the island of North Uist. North Uist is covered with an amazing amount of surface water. The landscape is dotted with lochs of all sizes, and the coast is riddled with small tidal inlets. Crofters' cottages squat snugly against the shore, seeming no higher than the ubiquitous Shetland ponies. On an island where land is apparently in such short supply, it may seem strange that horse riding is such a popular pastime. Between North Uist and South Uist lies the little island of Benbecula. South Uist is different from its neighbours, with uninhabitable bogs and moors in the east. Most of its population lives in the west, where the land is kinder. In the wild east and central parts of the island, it is very difficult to make a living. When the means of making a living fail, there is nothing to do but abandon the island way of life. This is what happened to the people of St. Kilda, far out in the Atlantic. The island is remote and storm-bound. It is virtually impossible to land in anything like a rough sea. The clouds of the North Atlantic seem to hang over each rock like a shroud. In 1930, the pressures of their harsh existence became more than the people of St. Kilda could bear. They called upon the government to rescue them, to help them abandon their home of many generations. A ship was sent, and they left. Since these films were taken, a new generation of St. Kildans has grown up, a generation that has never seen the island that formed the lives of their ancestors. St. Kilda is the remotest part of Britain, and a place with its own magic, as well as a sombre and forbidding appearance. When the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh visited St Kilda in the early 70s, it was to see the restoration work being carried out by the National Trust for Scotland. The island is inhabited every summer by parties rebuilding the old cottages. The main island in the St Kilda group, Hirta, is kept intact as a memorial to the community that once lived here. Across the long sweep of Village Bay, the stone cottages and sheep pens remain much as they were in 1930. The people lived largely by fishing, but also by collecting the eggs and the young gannets from the sheer crags where they nest. Young gannets are oily and full of fat, and they formed an important part of the diet of the old islanders. St Kilda has a number of unique species, among them the St Kilda wren, found nowhere else in the world. The Soy sheep that run wild on the island take their name from Soy, the smaller of the two main islands in the group. From the sadness of remote St Kilda, we travel landward once more, to the west coast of Scotland and back into the 20th century. The town of Ullapool is a prosperous little place. Its inhabitants derive most of their living from the sea, about equally from fishing and playing host to water sports enthusiasts. The town began to grow larger than a village in 1788, when it became the headquarters of the British Fisheries Society, designed to protect Scottish waters from foreign fishermen. The scenery in the Western Highlands is the essence of Scotland, a largely empty landscape today. The emptiness comes in part from a sad period of the 19th century, the clearances, when whole communities found themselves compelled to emigrate to a new home overseas. Driven by a combination of politics and economics, they went in search of a new life in North America, in Australia or New Zealand. However, there were a few places where the clearances had a very different effect. One was Inverewe in the Gairloch area. In the 1860s, Osgood Mackenzie bought a small piece of moorland here. Partly for his own satisfaction and partly to provide work for local people, he decided to make this unpromising place into a garden. Inverewe Gardens are a tribute to a man who simply did not know what failure was. Today, in the care of the National Trust for Scotland, the gardens contain flowers and shrubs from all over the world. The west and northwest coasts of Scotland boast some of the finest mountain scenery in Europe. The Torridon Mountains are less than 3,500 feet high, but their rugged grandeur makes up for their lack of height. In nearby Loch Duich, Eilean Castle has been completely restored since it was blown up by a government man-of-war in 1719. At that time, it was the garrison of some Jacobite supporters from Spain. Today, it is a memorial to the Clan MacRae. Loch Duich is a centre for salmon fishing. Not the elegant exercise with rod and line practised by the sporting gentry, but a more practical method involving a long seine net and a good deal of muscle power. The net result is the same: a few fine fish on the bank and the prospect of a good supper. At the head of Loch Duich stand the Five Sisters of Kintail. They form a range that runs along the north side of the River Shiel. Their highest peak tops 3,500 feet. The rivers here flow west through rugged valleys to the sea. The shore is sheltered and sandy, protected by the inner Hebrides. The shallow sea and the many bays and sea lochs provide ideal sailing conditions and quiet harbours when the day's work is done. Arisaig is a step on the road to the Isles. This area of the Western Highlands, for all its beauty, is a sad place of pilgrimage. At the head of Loch Shiel stands a memorial to commemorate the clansmen who fought and died for Bonnie Prince Charlie. One way to see the glories of the western coast is behind a steam locomotive, in this case a K1 class engine running from Fort William to Mallaig. The line is much frequented by enthusiasts for the good old days. The track runs along the coastal plain by lochs and villages, but always inland are the massive mountains. Ben Nevis is the highest mountain in Britain, at 4,406 feet. The next range to the south shelters Glen Coe, that place of evil memory where in February 1692, Campbell soldiers who had for days enjoyed the hospitality of the MacDonalds of Glen Coe turned on their hosts and slaughtered 40 members of the clan. The soldiers were acting under the orders of the British government, who wanted to make an example of those who were slow to sign allegiance to King William III. Campbells and MacDonalds have never forgotten what happened here. Glen Coe still attracts pilgrims who savour its forbidding atmosphere 300 years after the event. The turbulent relations between the Jacobites and the British Crown, even after the kingdoms were supposed to have been united, are remembered still among the Highlands, though usually more in sorrow than in anger. The MacDonalds of Clanranald administered their estates from Castle Tierran, built in the 14th century. During the Rising of 1715, they had to burn it down to prevent it from falling into enemy hands. It was during the 1745 Rising that Bonnie Prince Charlie escaped over the sea to Skye, like a bird on the wing. Today he would have travelled not on a rowboat, but by ferry from the Kyle of Lochs, arriving at the little harbour of Kailaki. Skye is a large island, but it is so indented by sea lochs that no place on the island is more than 5 miles from the sea. The local residents still keep the traditional Highland cap, and a good number maintain the old way of farming. The capital of Skye is Portree, with a population of about 1,000. The jagged peaks of the island offer an irresistible challenge to those who would test their strength and daring. Skye is a climber's paradise. The cliffs of the Store, with the old man perched on top like a stone cigar, and the 350-foot Kilt Rock, with its tartan pattern at knee height, are among climbs that attract the brave and the foolhardy from all over Europe. To look at the scenery from another point of view, it is the product of immense volcanic activity about 60 million years ago, when lava cooled quickly to form black basalt, and subsequent granitic intrusions pushed through the plateau formed by the lava. A few million years of erosion and a couple of ice ages, and you get Skye. Away from the lava flows and granitic intrusions in the south is the area known as Slate, sometimes called the Garden of Skye. Dunvegan Castle, the home of the chiefs of the Clan MacLeod, is reckoned to be the oldest continuously inhabited castle in Britain. The southern part of Skye is surrounded by many smaller islands with wonderful names. There's Egg, Rum and Canna, all lying on the horizon. The Clan MacDonald Centre tells the tale of the long feud between MacLeods and MacDonalds to see who owned these little jewels. Today, though, there is more nostalgia and less bloodletting among the Bluebells of spring on the island of Skye. To the south of Skye lie the rest of the Inner Hebrides, among them the Isle of Mull. The best way to get there is by ferry from Oban, a trip that is a pleasure in itself. The route takes the ship past landmarks of local history, such as Castle Duet, the home of the Clan MacLean, restored by the clan chief in 1912. When Lismore Lighthouse comes into view, the journey is nearly over. Tobermory, the chief town on Mull, sits on a small bay, on the bottom of which lies the wreck of the Florida, a galleon from the Armada. Like Ullapool, the town was built by the British Fisheries Society in 1788. The rest of Mull is a very ancient agricultural landscape, dotted mainly by the type of fortified lake dwelling known as a crannog. The cattle and sheep are highland breeds, probably not very different from the first beasts to be raised in this part of Scotland. Mull has a number of grand houses erected during the 19th century, long after the need for fortification had passed. One such house is Torresay, which stands on the site of a much earlier dwelling. The statues in the magnificent gardens were brought from Italy as the house was being constructed. The family that built it still live in Torresay Castle. As the ferry returns to the mainland, passing Duet Castle, it leaves behind an island that is a microcosm of its own, a miniature Scotland just a few miles offshore. Oban is the chief town in the county of Argyll. Its name means Little Bay, and it is known as the best harbour on the West Highland coast. Looming over the town is McCaig's Tower, a vast structure inspired by the Colosseum in Rome. It was built in the 1890s by a local banker who wanted to provide work for unemployed masons. And there it stands to this day. Nearby is the tiny uninhabited island of Staffa, virtually unknown before the naturalist Sir Joseph Banks managed to land there in 1772. Its most famous spectacle is Fingal's Cave, which inspired Mendelssohn to write his Hebrides Overture. But Sir Joseph was astounded by the basaltic formations in the cliffs, evidence of tremendous volcanic activity similar to the forces that created the Giant's Causeway in Ireland. Fingal's Cave is named after the mythical Irish giant and Gaelic hero Fionn na Gael. Just off the southern tip of Mull lies the island of Iona. St. Columba chose it in AD 563 for the centre from which his missionaries would travel all over Scotland. It was raided by the Vikings, who were not yet converted, in AD 806. The abbey survived, but worse was yet to come. During the Reformation in the 16th century, the abbey was destroyed. In the early 1900s, it was rebuilt by the Church of Scotland, and today it stands as a centre of Christian pilgrimage. The coast here is well supplied with safe havens, opening into the wide Atlantic. Castle Stalker sits on a tiny island offshore, brooding quietly over its checkered past. The castle is only 16th century. Dunad Fort nearby was the focal point of Scottish power for 4,000 years. At Crowray, The forest and lodge gardens lie within the setting of a typical Highland glen by the side of Loch Fyne. They offer a magnificent display of azaleas and rhododendrons. During the second half of the 18th century, the third Duke of Argyll decided that his 15th century ancestral castle was beginning to show its age. He decided to build a new one, and the result was Inverary Castle. Sailing round the Mull of Kintyre from Ardrishaig to Crinan was dangerous and time-consuming. In 1801, the Crinan Canal was opened, 9 miles of sheltered water that saved 2 days' sailing and countless lives. Today it is as popular with yachtsmen as it was with the old working sailors. The canal is used mainly by pleasure craft, but it still provides a sheltered passage to the Atlantic Ocean. The sea is still the workplace of many on this coast, however, rough or not. From Campbelltown in Kintyre, prawns and whitefish are the main quarry of the fishermen, instead of the herring that were once so numerous here. When the herring recover from a generation of ruthless overfishing, the large harbour may acquire a new lease of life. Not far away across the sea lies the purple bulk of the Isle of Arran. Because it contains a mixture of highland and lowland features, it is sometimes called Scotland in miniature. One of its many attractions is a museum with displays from the remote past until the coming of the petrol engine that replaced the horse as the main source of power. The cottage is furnished as it would have been about the turn of the century, in the simple but comfortable style of the island. The living room clock is in the Victorian style known as gingerbread, and the kitchen has a griddle for baking scones. On an altogether grander scale, Brodick Castle is a 19th century exterior concealing a medieval original. When it was first erected, it was intended to defend the Clyde estuary. The interior is as opulent as Victorian taste could make it, with heavy silver and a multitude of other family heirlooms. For many years it was the home of the Duke and Duchess of Montrose, but today it is in the safe hands of the National Trust for Scotland, with all of its treasures intact. It must have been a grand family home, solid but not pompous in the Victorian style. A kyle in Scotland is a narrow passage of water. The Kyles of Bute are the moat that surround the little island of Bute, about 15 miles long and 5 miles wide. It's an agricultural island with fine walks among gentle scenery. The only town is Rothesay, a favourite resort of the people of nearby Glasgow ever since the invention of the steamboat. It's a convenient journey down the River Clyde for a short holiday. Another favourite destination close to Glasgow, much visited by Glaswegians in search of a break, is Dunoon. The first recorded visit by a Glasgow family was in 1779, when they returned to the city bearing the news that only one man in the town could speak English, and he was the minister. Today, the Gaelic language has almost disappeared from the town, and the Glaswegians have arrived in force. All the lovely sights in this part of Scotland are close to the great city of Glasgow. One in particular attracts visitors above all others, Loch Lomond. Its name alone acts as a magnet to almost everyone else in the world who has heard of Scotland. Loch Katrine is another name to conjure with. A trip on the celebrated steamer Sir Walter Scott can make the whole week's work seem worthwhile, and the city, in reality so close, seem very far away. This quiet village stands on the shore of a loch with a strange name for Scotland. It's called the Lake of Menteith. It lies in the Trossachs, a range of mountains once frequented only by the likes of the rebel chieftain Rob Roy MacGregor, and regarded until really quite recently as the haunt of cattle robbers. Today, the area is recognised as one more part of Scotland's magnificent scenic heritage. A few miles to the east, Stirling guards the southernmost crossing of the River Forth. Next to the approach to the castle stands Mar's Wark, erected in 1570 by the first Earl of Mar, hence its name. Stirling has always been a strategic strongpoint. Chick Duffy, senior warden at the castle, describes its importance in the region's colourful history.
Here we are at Stirling Castle, the ancient fortification in the background on top of the volcanic rock, straddling the approaches north, south, east and west, and commanding the Carse of Stirling, where no fewer than 7 major battles were fought in Scottish history. But of course Stirling Castle wasn't only a fortification. Particularly in the reign of the Stuarts, it was the royal residence of the royal family of Scotland and the House of Stuart. Mary Queen of Scots was crowned Queen of Scotland here. Her son James VI was crowned King of Scotland in the old Holyrood Kirk just a few hundred yards down the road from the castle esplanade.
During its history, the castle has been repaired and altered numerous times. In the early 18th century, it was said to be mightily out of repair. By 1714, new defences were hastily drawn up and built. In 1746, the future of the castle as a brilliant court for the kings and queens of Scotland came to an abrupt halt when Bonnie Prince Charlie was defeated at Culloden. It still survives as a fine example of the military and domestic architecture of a long period of Scottish history, from the fortifications of its walls and ramparts to the very solid construction of the kitchens. The grandeur of the palace buildings reveals the place of the castle in the pomp of Scottish history. But there's more to it than stones and mortar.
No castle is complete without a ghost, and Stirling Castle has no fewer than 3. The Green Lady, the Pink Lady, and the strange anonymous footsteps rounding across the floorboards in the King's old building at the time of feasting and rejoicement. The Green Lady, reputed to be the lady-in-waiting to Mary Queen of Scots, who rescued the Queen when the curtains of her 4-poster bed in the Queen's bedchamber were being consumed by fire. The Pink Lady, reputed to walk from the castle through the esplanade to the old Holyrood Kirk in the vain search for her husband killed in one of the major wars. I, of course, have never seen any of the ghosts. I may be quite sceptical, but there are certain people in this castle who will not venture down into the old Elphinstone Tower because they sense fear and they sense evil within that location.
The echoes of history reverberate from the stones of Stirling. Now that peace enfolds the castle, it stands as a battle-scarred reminder of the way things used to be. Another reminder of the troubled past is the monument to Sir William Wallace, a national hero of the Wars of Independence in the 13th century. The 15th century Old Brig was another battlefield, and there's yet another close by.
Stirling Castle featured in Scottish history throughout the centuries, particularly so in the Scottish Wars of Independence with Sir William Wallace, the Battle of Stirling Bridge, Robert the Bruce and the Battle of Bannockburn, situated just a short distance away from the castle. The Battle of the Bannockburn in 1314 was one of the major influences in Scottish history. Robert the Bruce completely routed the English army at that battle and liberated his native country.
The battlefield is only 2 miles from Stirling, and a natural destination for anyone interested in Scottish history. In the Heritage Centre, vivid reconstructions of the battle itself tell the story of the triumph of Robert the Bruce, based on the accounts of those who were present on that historic day. We've circled Glasgow. Now it's time to visit the city itself. The traditional way to approach is by steamer up the River Clyde. Glasgow's famous trams are today an item in the spectacular Museum of Transport at Kelvin Hall. The museum has a fine collection of motor cars of all ages and splendid railway locomotives, dating back to the days when Clydeside was one of the major engineering centres of Britain and when Glasgow's subway was first built. New building has transformed parts of the city centre into, well, just another modern European city. Regret this, if you will, but it has produced a shopping area that is equal to or better than, anything provided by Glasgow's great rival to the east, Edinburgh. Although it might possibly be Paris or Rome, there is a certain something in the air here that never lets you forget that this is Glasgow. The energy of the people and their fierce local pride deny any parallel between Glasgow and any lesser city. Even if the pavement artists copy paintings by foreign fellows, they copy them onto the street of their own well-loved city. Presiding over these toings and froings are the city chambers, a masterpiece of Victorian civic architecture. The shipbuilders and tobacco barons who brought the wealth into Glasgow had no shadow of doubt that theirs was the finest city in Europe, if not the world, and they expressed this confidence in the grandeur of their city chambers. Designed by William Young in the Italian Renaissance style, the building was opened by Queen Victoria in 1888. The entrance hall is based on the plan of a Roman church, all stone, marble and mosaic. The total cost in 1888 was more than £500,000. The city chambers were built as a palace fit for men of achievement and stature. It's hard to believe, looking at these scenes of good cheer, that since the turn of the century, Glasgow had been a byword for inner city deprivation. As the largest city in Scotland, Glasgow is today shrugging off its legacy of industrial decline and once again taking on the mantle of a leader in Scotland's march into the 21st century. Southwest of Glasgow, in Ayrshire, is Troon, home of the Royal Troon Golf Club. It was opened in 1878, and it is second in importance only to St Andrews itself. In Ayr, the Old Brig is one of two referred to in a poem by Robert Burns. We're well and truly in Burns' country now. He was known as the Ayrshire poet. His statue stands in front of the law courts, and his name is on everyone's lips. His verses to the haggis, Scotland's national dish, are recited after the ceremony in which the chieftain of the puddin race is piped into dinner. Burns's parents lie in the churchyard at Alloway, a farmer and his wife who gave the world the man who has been called the poet of humanity. The cottage where he was born is just down the street.
Here at Alloway on the 25th of January 1759 was born Robert Burns, the national bard of Scotland. A pleasant village just a few miles outside Ayr and leading from Alloway down through the Burns Heritage Trail to Dumfries, where he died on the 21st of July 1796, aged only 37 years.
Into his few years, Burns packed a couple of lifetimes of experience and creativity. The vigour of his poems and their contribution to the Scottish language are immortal. The Brigadoon in Alloway may be one of the best-known small bridges in the world. Next to it stands the Burns Monument, built with funds raised from an admiring public and completed in 1823. Chick Duffy is also president of the Burns Federation. He's made a study of Burns's life.
Robert Burns is also synonymous with Stirling Castle and indeed with Bannockburn. It was after Bannockburn, when he paid the visit there, that he wrote Scots Wha Hae. And of course he visited Stirling Castle, the 26th of August 1787, on the occasion of his visit to his friends, the Kerrs at Harbison Lodge, nestling on the hill foots just a few miles away from the castle. And when he visited the castle, he was so incensed by what he saw that he went down to the Golden Lion Hotel in Stirling and he inscribed a few verses on the window pane there. Here Stuarts once in glory reigned, and laws for Scotland's weal ordained. But perhaps Robert Burns is remembered more for his humanity, and for many of the more famous songs and poems that he composed. A man's a man for all that, and it's coming yet for all that man to man the world o'er shall brothers be for all that.
Brotherhood was not a conspicuous aspect of life in these parts in 1570, when the Earl of Cassilis captured Alan Stewart and roasted him to death at Dunure Castle. His descendant, the 9th Earl, inherited Culzean Castle in 1744, and hired Robert Adam to transform the medieval fortress into a gentleman's residence of the period. The result is considered to be Adam's masterpiece, the jewel in the crown of the National Trust for Scotland. In 1969, the grounds were designated Scotland's first country park. The experiment was a great success, finding just the right balance between conserving the character of the estate and allowing access to anyone who wanted to relax in its unique atmosphere. The formal gardens are complemented by the much more natural setting of the Swan Pond. More than 300,000 visitors come to Culzean every year, many of them from North America. General Dwight D. Eisenhower was given part of the castle to use during his lifetime as a symbol of the gratitude of the Scots to the Supreme Commander of the Allied forces in Europe during World War II. It was a handsome gift. The oval staircase was built in a small and sunless courtyard that separated the two main parts of the old house to achieve a magnificent effect of light and space. The armoury was originally 2 rooms, but Adam brought them into one. Culzean overlooks the Ayrshire coast, where the Firth of Clyde joins the Irish Sea. The little fishing harbour of Girvan looks across towards Ireland. On the horizon, 10 miles offshore, sits Ailsa Craig, known as Paddy's Milestone because it's halfway to the Emerald Isle. To the south stretch the lowlands, the battle-scarred area where we began our visit to Scotland. Before we take our leave of this historic and welcoming country, there's just one more thing. We should finish properly, in the Scottish manner. What more appropriate than the celebrations that mark the end of the old year and the start of the new? The Festival of Hogmanay. Come away in and join the party. All the good things from the Scottish kitchen are on the table, our friends are round about us, and the old year's dying. We'll see it out in style. Along the street comes a dark-haired stranger, bearing gifts for the house. Taking a dram from the master of the house, he hands him a piece of coal, a coin, and an oatcake. It's first footing, the gift of prosperity for the new year. When you understand the finer points of ceremonies such as this, you might truly say that you have discovered Scotland.